Detective Lisa Harper was reviewing case files at 11:47 p.m. when Officer Danny Rodriguez burst through her door, face pale as a sheet. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he struggled to catch his breath, his uniform wrinkled from what had clearly been a long shift. "Detective, you need to hear this call recording," he said, hands trembling as he pressed play on his phone. A neighbor's panicked voice filled the small office. "There's a little girl next door, she's been alone for days. But that's not the strangest part, she keeps talking to the floor saying mommy's just sleeping down there, she gets hungry sometimes." Lisa's coffee grew cold as she listened to the recording twice more. Something about the caller's tone, the genuine fear mixed with confusion, made her stomach turn. She'd worked child cases for 8 years, but this felt different. 20 minutes later, Lisa stood outside 47 Elm Street, a rundown duplex with peeling paint and an overgrown lawn. The emergency response team had already cordoned off the area, but neighbors lingered on their porches despite the late hour, whispering among themselves. Inside, the house felt suffocating. The air was stale, filled with the scent of something Lisa couldn't quite identify, sweet yet rotten, like flowers left too long in water. She found the child in the kitchen, a tiny figure with dark hair tangled around her shoulders. 5-year-old Mia Chen sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor, her small fingers tracing patterns on the newly laid tiles. She looked up at Lisa with dark, serious eyes that seemed far too old for her face. "Are you here to wake up Mommy?" Mia asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Social worker Helen Santos knelt beside the child, her expression carefully neutral despite the concern etched in her features. Helen had seen everything in her 15-year career, but something about this little girl's calm demeanor unsettled her. "Sweetheart, where is your mommy?" Helen asked gently. Mia pointed down at the tiles beneath her. "She's sleeping under the pretty tiles. Daddy said she needed to rest, but sometimes she gets hungry and makes noises." Lisa exchanged a look with Officer Rodriguez, who had gone even paler. The strange smell seemed stronger near where Mia sat, and Lisa noticed the kitchen tiles looked freshly installed, their grout still bright white. "How long has Mommy been sleeping under there?" Lisa asked, crouching down to Mia's level. "Since the man came to help Daddy," Mia replied matter-of-factly. "They worked really hard to make Mommy comfortable. But now she's very quiet." Helen carefully lifted Mia from the floor, noting how the child had been surviving on scattered crackers and water from a cup she'd been refilling from the bathroom sink. Empty food containers littered the counter, evidence of a child trying to care for herself. As they prepared to leave, Mia suddenly pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. With the seriousness of someone much older, she handed Lisa a crayon drawing that made the detective's blood run cold. The drawing showed a stick figure of a woman lying beneath a pattern of squares, clearly meant to represent the kitchen tiles. Above the squares, another stick figure sat watching, with tears drawn as simple blue lines down its face. "This is Mommy's new bed," Mia explained, her voice carrying an eerie acceptance. "She said the man helped her get comfortable, but she's very quiet now. Sometimes I talk to her, but she doesn't talk back anymore." Lisa studied the drawing, her heart breaking for this innocent child who had no idea she'd been living above her mother's grave. The casual way Mia discussed the situation, as if it were perfectly normal, suggested she'd been conditioned to accept this horrific reality. "Mia, honey," Lisa said softly, "we're going to take you somewhere safe tonight, okay?" The little girl nodded, then looked back at the kitchen floor one more time. "Can you tell Mommy I'll be back to visit? I don't want her to be lonely." As they walked toward the door, Lisa made a silent promise to both the living child and the mother who lay beneath those pristine tiles. She would find the truth, no matter how dark it proved to be. The next morning brought a forensic team to 47 Elm Street, their equipment cases lined up on the front lawn like medical instruments preparing for surgery. Dr. James Mitchell, the department's lead forensic expert, had dealt with countless crime scenes, but something about this case had kept him awake most of the night. As the team prepared to examine the kitchen floor, Mia suddenly appeared in the doorway. She'd been staying with Helen Santos overnight, but had insisted on returning to check on Mommy. "No, don't wake Mommy up." Mia's voice cracked with panic as she saw the tools being arranged. She said if anyone moved the tiles, she'd never come back. Helen quickly scooped up the child, but Mia's desperate cries echoed through the house. "She needs to sleep. Daddy said if we moved the pretty tiles, Mommy would go away forever." Dr. Mitchell paused his preparations, the child's words confirming his worst suspicions. He'd already detected the unmistakable odor of decomposition beneath the pristine tiles, and his preliminary examination suggested recent construction work. "Helen, get the child out of here," Lisa instructed firmly. "This is no place for her right now." As Mia was led away, still calling back to the kitchen floor, Dr. Mitchell began his methodical examination. The tiles were high-quality ceramic, expensive for a house in this neighborhood. More importantly, the installation was recent. The grout was barely a week old, and there were still remnants of the installation process visible in the corners. "Detective Harper," Dr. Mitchell called out, "these tiles were laid within the last 10 days. Professional job but rushed. Look at these edges, someone was working fast." Lisa photographed everything while Officer Rodriguez ran background checks. The picture that emerged painted a troubling timeline. Sandra Chen, Mia's mother, had been reported missing exactly 2 weeks ago, not by her husband David, but by her sister Mia Chen Martinez. Why didn't the husband report his wife missing? Lisa wondered aloud. The answer came through Amy's phone call an hour later. Sandra's sister had been trying to reach her for days before finally calling police. According to Amy, Sandra had been planning to leave David and had asked Amy to help her find a lawyer. Sandra was scared, Amy explained through tears over the phone. David had been getting violent, especially when he drank. She was saving money to leave him, but she was terrified he'd try to take Mia away from her. Meanwhile, David Chen sat in the police station's interview room, his story shifting with each question. Initially, he claimed Sandra had run away with another man, leaving him and Mia without warning. But when pressed for details, his timeline became increasingly contradictory. "My wife was unstable," David insisted, his hands shaking as he spoke. "She'd been talking about leaving for months. I thought she was just threatening me, but then she actually did it." Lisa studied the man across from her. David was thin, nervous, with the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept in days. His story might have been believable if not for the evidence mounting against him. Financial records revealed that David had recently withdrawn $15,000 in cash from Sandra's savings account after she'd supposedly left town. More damning were the home improvement store receipts found in his truck. Ceramic tiles, cement, plastic sheeting, and industrial-grade adhesive, all purchased the same day Sandra was last seen alive. "Mr. Chen," Lisa said, spreading the receipts across the table, "can you explain why you bought these materials the day your wife disappeared?" David's composure cracked. I was fixing the kitchen. Sandra had been complaining about the old linoleum for months. I thought if I surprised her with new tiles, maybe she'd be happy again. But security footage from the home improvement store told a different story. David had purchased the materials at 11 p.m., working alone, his face grim with determination rather than the excitement of someone planning a surprise. The most chilling revelation came from Mia herself during her interview with child psychologist Dr. Rebecca Walsh. In the safe, comfortable environment of the Children's Advocacy Center, Mia began to share more details about that night. "Mommy told me she was tired of Daddy yelling," Mia explained while coloring with crayons. "She said she wanted to go away with me, but Daddy got really mad. Then Mommy went to sleep under the pretty tiles and doesn't have to listen to loud voices anymore." Dr. Walsh exchanged a meaningful look with Lisa through the one-way glass. The child's matter-of-fact description of her mother's sleeping revealed the psychological protection her young mind had created to survive an incomprehensible trauma. As evidence continued to mount, one neighbor's testimony provided the final piece of the puzzle. Mrs. Patterson, who lived in the adjoining duplex, had heard violent arguing the night Sandra disappeared, followed by hours of construction noise that continued until dawn. "I thought about calling the police," she admitted tearfully, "but domestic disputes were so common from that house. I never thought someone could do something so horrible." The interrogation room felt smaller with each passing hour as David Chen's carefully constructed story began to unravel. Lisa had seen guilty men break before, but David's collapse was particularly devastating because of the innocent child involved. "Your daughter drew pictures, Mr. Chen," Lisa said, sliding Mia's crayon drawings across the metal table. "She drew Mommy sleeping under the tiles. She drew you and another man working in the kitchen. She drew herself sitting on the floor talking to her mother." David's face crumpled as he stared at his daughter's artwork. The simple crayon strokes told a story more damning than any forensic evidence. In a child's innocent perspective, the drawings revealed the horrible truth he tried so desperately to hide. "She wasn't supposed to see," David whispered, his voice breaking. "I told her to stay upstairs, but she came down anyway." "See what, David?" Lisa pressed gently. "What wasn't she supposed to see?" The dam finally burst. Through tears and broken sentences, David began to confess, but even his confession was laced with self-justification and blame. Sandra was going to leave me, he said, wiping his nose with his sleeve. She was going to take Mia away and I couldn't lose my daughter. Sandra was having an affair, she was going to run away with some guy and take everything I cared about. Lisa remained silent, knowing that interrupting would only slow the flow of information. She'd learned that guilty people often needed to tell their story to make someone understand their twisted logic. I didn't mean for it to happen, David continued. We were arguing about the money, about Mia, about everything. Sandra said she'd already talked to a lawyer, that she was going to take half of everything and get full custody. She said I was a failure, a drunk, that Mia would be better off without me. Bank statements spread across Lisa's desk painted a different picture of David's desperation. His gambling debts totaled nearly $80,000, accumulated over 2 years of secret casino visits and online betting. Sandra had discovered the debt just weeks before her death, and had threatened to expose his addiction to her family and potentially the courts. She was going to ruin me, David said, his self-pity evident. Sandra found out about the gambling, about the money I'd lost. She said she was going to tell everyone, that no judge would give me custody once they knew what I'd done. Phone records revealed a more complex picture. Text messages between David and his co-worker Marcus Webb showed a different timeline than David's original story. Marcus had helped with what David called a home renovation project, but the messages suggested urgency and secrecy rather than a planned improvement. Marcus doesn't know anything, David said quickly when confronted with the messages. I just told him I needed help moving some furniture and installing tiles. He thought I was surprising Sandra with a kitchen renovation. But Marcus Webb's interview revealed troubling details. When police brought him in for questioning, the construction worker admitted to helping David with late-night work but claimed ignorance about Sandra's whereabouts. David called me around midnight, Marcus explained nervously. Said he had an emergency home project that couldn't wait. He was paying cash, good money, so I didn't ask too many questions. But the whole thing felt weird, working in the middle of the night, David acting so jumpy and paranoid. The most damaging evidence came from Sandra's sister Amy, who had been staying in close contact with Sandra in the weeks before her death. Phone records showed Sandra had called Amy the afternoon of her disappearance, making plans to meet the next day to discuss divorce lawyers. Sandra was finally ready to leave him, Amy told Lisa through tears. She'd been scared for so long, but she'd found the courage to protect herself and Mia. She was supposed to come to my house that night with Mia, but she never showed up. Lisa discovered that David had recently increased Sandra's life insurance policy to $200,000, signing the paperwork just 6 weeks before her death. When combined with his mounting gambling debts and Sandra's plans to leave him, the motive became crystal clear. The final nail in David's coffin came from his own cell phone. GPS data showed he'd been at home during the entire time period when he claimed Sandra had left with another man. His phone hadn't moved from the house for over 12 hours, directly contradicting his alibi about being out looking for his wife. Mr. Chen, Lisa said, her voice steady despite her disgust, your phone's GPS data shows you never left the house the night Sandra disappeared. Your coworker confirms you were doing construction work in your kitchen at 3 a.m. Your daughter's drawings show she witnessed something traumatic. It's time to tell the truth. David's last attempt at deception crumbled as he realized the evidence against him was insurmountable. But even as he prepared to confess, he continued to paint himself as the victim of circumstances rather than the perpetrator of a calculated murder. The excavation of 47 Elm Street's kitchen floor began at dawn on a gray Tuesday morning. Dr. Mitchell's team worked with methodical precision, carefully removing each tile to preserve evidence while uncovering the horror that lay beneath. Lisa stood at the kitchen doorway, steeling herself for what they would find. The first signs of Sandra Chen's remains appeared after 2 hours of careful work. Wrapped in thick plastic sheeting and buried beneath a layer of concrete, Sandra's body had been hidden with the kind of deliberate planning that spoke to premeditation rather than a crime of passion. Detective Harper, Dr. Mitchell called out, his voice tight with professional control. We've got a body, female, wrapped in plastic. Significant trauma to the skull, appears to be blunt force. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of little Mia who had spent 10 days living above her mother's makeshift grave, talking to the floor and believing her mother was simply sleeping beneath the pretty tiles. The medical examiner's preliminary findings were devastating. Sandra had suffered multiple blunt force trauma injuries to her head and face, consistent with repeated strikes from a heavy object. The murder weapon was discovered wrapped alongside the body, a claw hammer with David's fingerprints and Sandra's blood still visible despite attempts to clean it. But the most heartbreaking revelation came from Mia's expanded testimony to Dr. Walsh. In the safety of the Child Advocacy Center, with toys and comfortable surroundings, Mia began to share more details about that terrible night. "I heard Mommy crying," Mia said while arranging toy blocks into patterns. "She was scared and Daddy was using his loud voice. I went downstairs because I wanted to help Mommy, but then Daddy had the heavy thing in his hand." Dr. Walsh gently encouraged Mia to continue, her heart breaking for the child who had witnessed such violence. "What happened next, sweetheart?" "Daddy hit Mommy with the heavy thing and then she went to sleep," Mia continued with the matter-of-fact tone that had become her way of coping. "There was red stuff and Mommy wouldn't wake up when I tried to shake her. Daddy said Mommy was just sleeping very deeply and that she needed to rest under the new floor." The psychological manipulation David had used on his daughter became clear as Mia continued her account. He had convinced the 5-year-old that her mother's death was merely sleep, that the burial was a comfortable resting place, and that revealing the truth would result in losing both parents. "Daddy said if I told anyone about Mommy's sleeping place, the police would take me away and I'd never see either of them again," Mia explained. "He said Mommy chose to sleep under the tiles because it was quiet and peaceful there." As the evidence mounted, David realized his situation was hopeless. When police arrived at his workplace to arrest him, he panicked and attempted to flee, leading to a high-speed chase through the city that ended only when he crashed his car into a concrete barrier. But David's desperation reached new heights when he convinced police to let him see Mia one last time, claiming he wanted to say goodbye. Instead, he attempted to use his daughter as leverage, grabbing her during the supervised visit and holding her as a human shield. "She's all I have left," David shouted as police negotiators surrounded the small room at the children's center. "Sandra's dead, my life is over, and Mia is the only thing that matters to me now." The standoff lasted 3 agonizing hours. David held Mia close while making increasingly desperate demands: money, a car, safe passage out of state. But Mia, despite her young age and trauma, seemed to understand that her father was no longer the man who had once tucked her into bed at night. "Daddy," Mia said in her small, clear voice that carried across the room to the negotiators, "Mommy wants you to let me go. She told me in my dreams that you need to stop being angry now." The child's words seemed to pierce through David's desperation. Dr. Walsh, who had been coaching the negotiators, recognized that Mia was using the same language her father had taught her, speaking of her mother as if she were still alive and communicating. "Mommy said she's not mad at you anymore," Mia continued, her small hand reaching up to touch her father's face. "But she wants me to be safe now. She said you need to let the nice people help you." David's resolve crumbled completely. The child he claimed to love more than anything had become the voice of the woman he'd murdered, offering him the forgiveness he desperately needed but didn't deserve. With tears streaming down his face, he released Mia and surrendered to police. As officers led David away in handcuffs, he looked back at his daughter one last time. Mia stood in Dr. Walsh's protective embrace, no longer the shell-shocked child who had been found talking to kitchen tiles, but a little girl beginning to understand the magnitude of what had happened to her family. "I'm sorry, baby," David called out. "I'm so sorry for everything." Mia watched him go with the same serious expression she'd worn throughout the ordeal. "Daddy needs help," she told Dr. Walsh quietly. "Maybe when he's not angry anymore, he can visit Mommy's grave too." The courtroom was packed the day David Chen was sentenced for the murder of his wife. Lisa sat in the front row, having followed the case from that first disturbing 911 call to this moment of legal resolution. Beside her, Amy Chen Martinez held Mia's small hand, the child now 6 years old and slowly healing from her trauma. David's confession during the standoff had been recorded and became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. There was no denying his guilt, no possibility of claiming self-defense or temporary insanity. He had calculated the murder, planned the cover-up, and psychologically manipulated his 5-year-old daughter into becoming an unwitting accomplice to his crime. The defendant not only murdered his wife in cold blood, prosecutor Janet Morrison stated during closing arguments, but he forced his own child to live above her mother's grave for 10 days, convincing her that this horror was normal, that her mother was simply sleeping beneath the kitchen floor. Marcus Webb, David's co-worker, received a lighter sentence after cooperating fully with investigators. Though he had helped David install the tiles, the court accepted his testimony that he genuinely believed he was helping with a home renovation project. His cooperation had been crucial in establishing the timeline and methods David had used to conceal Sandra's body. Dr. Walsh's testimony about Mia's psychological state proved particularly compelling. "This child normalized living above her mother's grave," she told the court. She developed elaborate coping mechanisms, including regular conversations with her deceased mother, that allowed her to survive an incomprehensible situation. The psychological manipulation she endured was as criminal as the murder itself. The judge's sentencing was swift and decisive. David received life in prison without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder, plus additional years for child endangerment, insurance fraud, and tampering with evidence. "Mr. Chen," Judge Patricia Williams said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute moral authority, "you have committed crimes so heinous that they challenge our understanding of human nature. You murdered your wife, buried her body beneath your kitchen floor, and then convinced your 5-year-old daughter that this was normal. This child's innocence protected her from fully understanding the horror she lived through, but her truth brought justice for her mother." Sandra Chen's funeral, held 2 weeks after the sentencing, drew hundreds of mourners. Lisa attended, watching as Mia carefully placed one of her drawings on top of her mother's coffin. Not the disturbing images of stick figures beneath tiles, but a bright, colorful picture of Sandra surrounded by flowers and sunshine. "Now you have a pretty place to sleep with flowers," Mia whispered to the coffin, her words carrying both the innocence of childhood and the wisdom of someone who had survived the unthinkable. Amy had proven to be the stable, loving guardian Mia needed. The custody transfer had been seamless, as Amy had been like a second mother to Mia throughout her life. Sandra's sister created a home filled with photographs of Sandra, ensuring that Mia would grow up knowing her mother's story, the real story, not the twisted version David had created. "Mommy is in heaven now, not under scary tiles," Amy explained gently as they visited Sandra's grave together. "She's watching over you and she's proud of how brave you've been." Dr. Walsh continued working with Mia through intensive therapy sessions designed to help the child process her trauma and develop healthy coping mechanisms. The transformation was remarkable. Mia slowly stopped talking about her mother as if she were still alive and began to understand the permanence of death. "I understand now," Mia told Dr. Walsh during one breakthrough session. "Mommy can't come back, but she still loves me. And it's okay to be sad that she's gone." Detective Harper found the case changing her own career trajectory. She established a specialized unit within the police department focused specifically on crimes involving children, using her experience with Mia's case to develop better protocols for interviewing child witnesses and victims. 6 months after the trial, Lisa received a letter from Amy with photos of Mia starting first grade. The little girl looked healthy and happy, her smile genuine rather than the eerily calm expression she'd worn during those first terrible days. "Mia is doing wonderfully in school," Amy wrote. "She's made friends, loves her teacher, and is excelling in art class. Dr. Walsh says her healing has been remarkable. She still visits Sandra's grave monthly, but now she brings flowers instead of drawings of people sleeping under tiles. She talks about Sandra with love and sadness, which Dr. Walsh says is exactly how a child should remember a parent they've lost." The letter continued with an invitation to Mia's school play, where she would be performing in a production about families and love. "She specifically asked me to invite you," Amy wrote. "She says you're the detective who helped her mommy find peace." Lisa accepted the invitation, understanding that some cases transcend professional duty and become personal missions. Mia had not only solved her mother's murder through her innocent testimony, but had taught everyone involved about the resilience of the human spirit and the power of truth to emerge even from the darkest circumstances. 1 year after Sandra Chen's murder, Mia was running freely across the playground of Lincoln Elementary School, her laughter mixing with that of her new friends as they played tag during recess. Amy Chen Martinez watched from the sideline, marveling at how far her niece had come from the traumatized child who had once sat talking to kitchen tiles. Detective Lisa Harper stood beside Amy, both women sharing a quiet moment of satisfaction at seeing Mia's transformation. The specialized unit Lisa had created for crimes involving children had already handled 12 cases, with Mia's case serving as a model for how to properly interview and support child witnesses. "She still has nightmares sometimes," Amy confided as they watched Mia climb the monkey bars with determined focus. "But Dr. Walsh says that's normal. What matters is that she's processing the trauma instead of hiding from it." Mia had indeed made remarkable progress in therapy. Dr. Walsh documented her case as an example of how children could heal from even the most severe psychological trauma when given proper support and a stable, loving environment. The child who had once spoken of her mother as if she were merely sleeping had learned to grieve properly, to understand death, and to preserve her mother's memory in healthy ways. "I miss Mommy every day," Mia had told Dr. Walsh during their final regular session. "But I know she would want me to be happy and to do good things. Aunt Amy helps me remember the good times with Mommy, not just the scary times. The monthly visits to Sandra's grave had evolved into something beautiful rather than heartbreaking. Mia no longer brought disturbing drawings of figures beneath tiles, but instead brought fresh flowers, colorful pictures of her school activities, and stories about her new friends. She would sit by the headstone and talk to her mother about normal childhood things, her favorite books, her struggles with math homework, her excitement about learning to ride a bicycle. "Mommy, I got an A on my spelling test," she said during one recent visit, placing a bouquet of yellow daisies on the grave. "And I made a new friend named Sarah who likes to draw pictures just like me. But my pictures now are of happy things like rainbows and puppies." Amy had created a home environment that honored Sandra's memory while allowing Mia to build new, positive associations. Photographs of Sandra were displayed throughout the house, but they focused on happy moments. Sandra laughing, Sandra hugging baby Mia, Sandra celebrating birthdays and holidays. The dark final chapters of Sandra's life were acknowledged but not allowed to overshadow the love she had given her daughter. Dr. Walsh's final evaluation of Mia's progress noted several key breakthroughs that marked her successful healing. The child had stopped engaging in conversations with absent people, had developed appropriate emotional responses to loss and grief, and had formed healthy attachments to her new caregivers and friends. Most importantly, she had learned to separate her father's actions from her own sense of self-worth. "I know Daddy did a bad thing," Mia explained to Dr. Walsh during their last session. "But that doesn't mean I'm bad. Mommy loved me and Amy loves me and I can love people too without being scared." David Chen remained in prison, his appeals having been denied. He had written several letters to Amy requesting to see Mia, but both Amy and Dr. Walsh agreed that contact with her father would not be in the child's best interests, at least not until she was much older and could make that decision for herself. The case had attracted national attention, leading to changes in how police departments handled crimes involving child witnesses. Mia's innocent drawings and matter-of-fact testimony had not only solved her mother's murder but had influenced law enforcement protocols across the country. On this particular day at the playground, as Lisa prepared to leave, Mia ran over to give her a hug. The detective had maintained a relationship with the child, serving as both a mentor and a reminder that justice had been served for Sandra. "Detective Lisa," Mia said, her voice bright with childhood enthusiasm, "I'm going to be in a school play next week. I'm playing a flower that grows in the sunshine. Will you come watch me?" Lisa smiled, remembering the broken child who had once offered her drawings of figures buried beneath tiles. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart." As they walked toward the parking lot, Mia suddenly stopped and looked up at the clear blue sky. For a moment, her expression grew serious, reminiscent of the intense child who had survived such horror. "Mommy," she whispered to the sky, "I'm okay now. You don't have to worry anymore. I'm learning to be happy again just like you would want me to be." Detective Harper felt tears prick her eyes as she witnessed this moment of pure healing. Mia had not only survived her trauma but had transformed it into strength. The little girl who had once been trapped in a house of horrors, talking to the floor where her mother lay buried, had become a symbol of resilience and hope. As Mia skipped ahead to join Amy at the car, Lisa reflected on the case that had changed her career and her understanding of human nature. Sometimes the smallest voices did carry the biggest truths. Mia had not just solved her mother's murder, she had saved herself, and in doing so had shown everyone around her that even in the darkest circumstances, love and truth could prevail. The story of 47 Elm Street had ended not with more darkness, but with a child's laughter echoing across a playground, a sound that represented the ultimate victory of innocence over evil, of healing over harm, of life over death.